Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Salwowski. I am Fullstack Developer at Docplanner. I've been working here for like more than 3 years actually. And today we're gonna cover the topic of managing data, especially with Vuex and Normalizer. This is our agenda. And let's start with sources of data. So, what comes to your mind in terms of sources of data? Of course, API like REST or GraphQL is the obvious one. What else? Any ideas? Just shout. User data, but it's the sources of data. Where this user data comes from? Cookies, local storage. What else? What? Files. Okay, files. So like configs. Okay. What else? Requests. So like API, right? You mean this or something else? Requests coming from user, like the URL? Okay, so URL and query string. Anything else? These are the things that came to my mind. So we have like files configs, WebSockets, local and session storage, URL, the params, the query strings, cookies, and forms. Forms are also the source of data. So where do we store this data? I mean, not the local and session storage, but within the app. Where do we store the data? Any ideas? What? Vuex, okay. So the store. What else? Local state, you mean the component data, right? Yeah, okay. Anything else? There is one more thing. You have some configs and you have also some runtime configs. Like you have a config for each country, but you only need to load one during the runtime, and you will use it only the one config. So, what are the problems with data? First of all, data may be nested. And nesting is a real problem, especially when you have loads of data. Then you have to synchronize. You use some data on one screen and then you need it on another. Do you refetch it or reuse it? This data across screens may be completely inconsistent. And what is the source of truth of data, as we have different sources of it and different places when we can store it. So, first demo about the inconsistent data. We have this simple app, and in the runtime, we simulate fetching and refetching some data. Imagine like this is the post, these are the comments for the post, and look at the avatars. So here, this daemon guy has this avatar, and the same daemon guy has other avatar. Imagine that this comment was fetched like after 30 seconds, and during that time, his avatar changed. But we didn't synchronize this data. And that's the real issue when we can have what we can have in real application, especially when we have a lot of data, like this is like Facebook, let's say. You have posts, comments, but Facebook has much more. Okay. So what are the solutions for these problems? First thing, we need like one place to store it, so there is Vuex. It may help us with synchronization, but it will not solve from the ground this problem. Consistency, the same as synchronization. It may help us, but it won't do it for us. But this is the source of truth, if configured well, and if you keep getting the data from the same place, module, or whatever. But we have also Normalizer that we can use to help us. Normalizer is a package that helps us normalize some JSON data according to some schema. It's really lightweight because when minified is 6.9 kilobytes, and when minified and gzipped is 2.2, so not a big deal. Normalizer gives us three main things. First one is schema. This is the set of constructors for creating the schemas for our data. Second one is the normalize function and the denormalize function. We will talk about each briefly later. About schema. We have 5 types of schemas that we can define, but from my experience, I will tell you that these two, entity and array, are the most common, and the rest is either some strange things in the API are going on, or there are some edge cases. So, normalizer will help us with nested data, because we will get it flattened. It may help us with consistency, because when we flatten the data from the one response is consistent across. And with source of truth, because if we store this normalized data in one place, then we're good. So, another demo. We have like the same random data generated, but this time it is normalized. Okay, cool. This guy has 3 avatars, everywhere the same. But if we go to home and then we go back here, the same guy would not have this avatar. There are different set of avatars for different users because the data may have changed. We didn't store it, we didn't persist it during the runtime, and front-end applications, when they are single-page applications, they are not stateless, they are stateful. So we need to take care of it. Okay. So, if we combine Vuex and Normalizer, we will solve the nested data problem, consistency, because we will keep these things consistent as we keep them in one place, like in one Vuex module, and there will be one source of truth. So no matter that you will go to one page, then to another, and get back, the data will be the same. This is like super combo solution, and it's really lightweight. But first, let's define some things. The most important thing is entities. Entity is a singular, identifiable, and separate object. So, singular, there is always one, like one user, one post, one comment. There is never a set of things. They are identifiable, so they have some sort of ID or set of IDs which is unique across the application, and they are separate objects. Additional rules. Entities should or even must be flat. There shouldn't be nestings in each entity, and should always, or rather must always, have the same structure and fields. The presence of fields may differ, because sometimes you have a post that has comments and another can have like no comments. But the name of the field where we store comments should never change. Or its type. If it's an array, then it is an array. It's never object. And entities of each type must be stored in the same place, because otherwise we would have to synchronize them. So, how do we define entities with Normalizer? We have tools to define schema, as I showed you on previous slide. Normalizer gives us schema, which is the set of constructors. First one, entity. We need to pass the name, the schema definition, and you can also have some additional options that I'm going to show you later, one of them. So, how it goes? We have some posts, the array of posts, which is our collection, and this is the array of post schema. Post schema has the definition where in the fields of comments, we will have normalized comment collection, so the array of comments, and also a user based on the user schema. And the same goes for the comment and for the user. For this input, when we put it to normalize function, and we say that this is the post collection, and you should normalize it based on the post collection schema. This will be the output. The output has two fields. One is entities. This is the set of our unique entities with given types, the names that we defined in the previous slide, right here. And the result. Result may be very useful because this is the set of IDs of the root elements in the collection from the input. So the result here is set of IDs of the posts. Okay, so how do we integrate with Vuex? We need a module, a place to store them, so it will be just the state. We need some mutations to update and remove entities, and some getters to fetch them from the store. Remember, when you implement such thing, keep it simple, don't add anything connected to the API. This module should have no knowledge of the API and how the data is fetched or where from it is fetched. There are some examples. I will share this presentation later. There is one TypeScript plugin for this, and there is like the article with the very basic solution for entities and Vuex. And we will keep like with this approach with ES6, as not all of you may know TypeScript. And there is one very important rule. Always keep your schemas, you know, this user schema and post schema and comment schema in separate files. It will prevent you from making the reference cycles, which we will talk about later. So, final demo. How it goes with normalized state with Vuex. Okay, so the avatars are consistent. Let's go to another page. And well, everything is still the same. Imagine that we would go to another page, like this user's profile, and this avatar would be there already. This is very useful for reducing the amount of data that you need to fetch from the API. You can render initial state from the very beginning when you go across some pages, and you can improve your UX with it. But what if data is inconsistent in the API? So imagine that one endpoint is returning user where there is field full name and there is like first name and last name in it, combined already. And another endpoint, for some unknown reason, returns name and surname as two different fields. You need to first transform the data to a common state, to a common shape and structure before normalizing it. Otherwise, you will have ifs across your whole applications and you don't want it. Trust me. Normalizer has additional options to its schema as a third argument. One of these is process strategy. How it works. Process strategy accepts three arguments: the value, the parent, and key. Value is like the current entity that we're normalizing. So, we're destructing it. We're taking name, surname, and the rest of the user. We are putting here full name, name and surname, and destructing the user. This is the simplest way to do it, because even though if there is no name and surname, and user here has the full name, it will be overwritten. So we are consistent across the whole application with it. Okay, what are the most common mistakes that you can do in this approach? First of all, redefining an entity. If you have defined in one place the schema of a user, do not redefine it. You will be likely to get into reference cycles. You won't be able to find where this schema is used, and your code will be bloated totally. always use the reference that you have already defined. Next one. This one is tricky, and it may really harm your performance, as it is reference cycle. You know, the simplest example of reference cycle, imagine you have a module A and module B. Module A imports module B, and module B imports module A. You have the cycle. So the same thing you can do with your schemas. Imagine that a comment has a user, and the user has a list of comments. Normal thing in backend applications, but here, not really a good idea, because your normalization may not work correctly, and their normalization will definitely not work correctly. So, to solve this problem, you can either just set the IDs of comments on the user, or vice versa, and not put it in schema. There may be also a reference of the same type. Imagine that you have comments, and like Facebook, you can add a comment to a comment. So a comment can have subcomments. And you can totally define it as long as the same comment won't have a subcomment which is the same comment. So with maybe some example, you have a comment with ID 1, and in subcomments there shouldn't be any comment with ID 1. When you have a view application, you have many views, and you can query your data separately. Like, you have a post, and there is like 100 comments in the post, and you render it with the if. And instead of passing the comment object to the comment component, you pass just the ID, and then you get, by some getter or whatever, the comment by ID from the store. And this operation will be repeated as many times as many comments you have to render. This is a tricky situation because Vuex bindings are not really performant where are too many of them. What you can do in this situation, like you have this post with many comments and you just fetch the entity of from the store in each post comment component. You can fetch all the comments for given post in the top level component, which is like here post view, and then just pass the object here. You can improve the performance drastically. I had one simple page with some set of buttons that were like, their only purpose was to toggle some features in our countries, and we have like 200 different sets of settings, and each setting is in each country, and we have like 15 or 20 countries. I don't know how many right now. And this gives us around 4,000 buttons. And right now, with any change, we would have to update these 4,000 buttons with these dynamic getters. It was horrible because the page in development mode where you where Vuex is not in strict mode and you have the DevTools to inspect it, the page would freeze for like 5 seconds. Instead, when I got it to root level and fetched all the settings for each country, so we have like 15 sets of features right now, then it increased the speed like 30 times or something like this. So be really careful with it. The last thing is the normalizing. You remember, normalizer gives us schema, normalize, and denormalize functions. When you have like the wall, this is a very simplified example. Like this is, imagine this is a GraphQL query. You take posts. For each post, you take comments, likes, user, and whatever else. There are shares, many other things maybe there. And for each comment, you also have subcomments. Each subcomment has likes, each like has user, each subcomment and comment also have user. Oh my god, there is a whole lot of data. And imagine right now, while denormalizing, you just fetch all of the data at once and pass it. So it would be like an array of like 1000 posts. Each post can have like between 0 and 1000 comments. It's just enormous amount of data. It will freeze your app, and don't do it with deeply nested chunks. You can chunk it like per post or per comment when you have deeper nestings, but only when you can control the amount of data that you're taking. Never when there is uncontrollable amount, because your performance will be killed instantly. And after some threshold, the application will just break. So, let's summarize. Vuex and Normalizer, you can use it to flatten data, to avoid some synchronization and inconsistency issues. Always keep your entities, which are normalized, in single Vuex module. This will be your single source of truth, and use getters, either in modules or components, to fetch this data from your store. Keep entity schema in separate files, each of them. Currently, we are working on an application that didn't follow this one simple rule, and we had a lot of problems connected with it. Always use defined schemas, never hard code. This is another issue that was in this application, and we weren't able to identify where each entity is used and where do we have this data from, what is the structure of this data. It was pure hell. Batch or denormalize to improve the performance, and avoid reference cycles at all costs. Really. Reference cycles are the killers here. So, any questions? Yeah. What's the approach for denormalizing bigger chunks? You should first split it. Like you have 1000 posts. So you don't denormalize the list of 1000 posts, but you go in each and fetch the post data denormalized in it. This is like in contradiction to batching, but all in all, it is safer because you have control. You only have big amount of data at once for limited number of entities. Otherwise, you're out of control at all. Another question? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I will show you the source. Yeah, I'm gonna show you the module. So, this is our entities module. It is really. Yeah, sure. Big enough? Okay, so first, our state is empty. And when we have entities, you remember this this slide. Maybe I will get back to this slide where we were having the input and output. Okay, so for given input, we just get an object with two keys, entities and result. So in our application, when we normalize some input based on some schema, we get these entities and result. Entities, we just push to the module that is responsible for storing them and all the operations. And this is this very module. We go by each entity type, and each entity in it, and we just set it on the state. This way, we have one source of truth and one place that we can fetch it from. To fetch these entities, we can have like some getters, either to fetch all. This one is really useful when denormalizing, or you can like fetch set of entities by type and IDs. So this is like the really simple implementation of the whole structure. We have our own package that has maybe a few more features, but basically it's the same. Did I answer your question about the store? So now the component, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, right. So the normalizing is one of the approaches, or you can just use the getters. Yeah, I'm gonna show you like the example. We have this wall module, and we have this one getter. As we stored our IDEs in the state of this module, we can now use it to denormalize. We just give their IDEs the schema that we normalized based on, and we just pass there all the entities that we have in our store. Normalize it, we just denormalize it to the same structure that we received before, and we can use it just like that. We have some posts, and for each post we pass the post to the component, and then we have already the comments, and so on and so forth. Did I answer your question? In the article and the example, the TypeScript example, there is more of it, but I didn't want to include everything that you can do with this data because it would be just too much. I will post the presentation later and you can use it however you want. Any other questions? Okay. So I think that's it. Thank you.